Data classes. We have learned about 5 primitive types: booleans, integers, floats, strings, and the special none. We can use these to represent many kinds of data, but they have a limitation since they are so simple and cannot be combined with each other. To increase our capabilities, we will learn about a new category of types, which is composite types. Composite types are named because they are composed of other types, unlike primitive types. The first kind of composite types we will learn about are data classes. Data classes are a data structure that allow us to combine other types together to make a new type. You should not think of data class as a type itself, instead, it is a way of creating new types. Or put another way, data classes are a kind of type, without being a type themselves. Let's take a look at an example data class. First, we must import a decorator from the Dataclasses module. Then we create a definition for the data class by writing the header and body of the data class. The header requires the decorator, the class keyword, the name of the new data class, and a colon. The body requires that we specify the fields, each on their own line. Once defined, we can create instances of the data class using the constructor function, which has the same name as the defined data class. Storing the result in a variable allows us to use the instance later, such as shown here where we print the my_box variable. Each part of this example needs to be broken down further. Perhaps the most confusing part of data classes is the decorator. The decorator is the @data class annotation. The symbol that we see in front of the word data class is called a decorator. We are not going to explain what this does in depth or why we need it, but we definitely do need it. In short, a decorator adds extra functionality on top of classes to make them data classes, which are far more powerful and convenient. There's a lot that can go wrong here when using a decorator. You must import the data class decorator from the Dataclasses module without including the symbol. However, when you put the decorator above the class definition, you absolutely must include the symbol. Messing up either part will prevent Python from understanding that you want to create a data class. The fields of a data class are the most useful part, since they allow us to bundle up related data into a single place. Each field is like a variable inside of the data class. The rules for naming fields are the same as the rules for naming variables. First, the name must have only letters, digits, and underscores. Second, the name must only begin with letters or underscores. The rules for specifying the type of field is similar to the rules for specifying the type of function parameters, except instead of commas each field is instead on its own line. Once a data class is defined, we can create any number of instances that represent concrete versions of the original data class. Instances of a data class are created by calling the constructor function. The constructor is a special function created by the data class definition, and given the same name. The similarity between defining a function and defining a data class is very strong. The similarity between calling a function and instantiating a data class is even stronger. Each field of the data class's definition corresponds to an argument for the constructor. The order and type of each field must match the order and type of each argument. A very confusing concept is what a class represents compared to an instance of the class. A similar concept is the difference between a stencil and a drawing. Another similar concept is the difference between a recipe and a cake. In all these cases, one of these is an idea, something totally theoretically. The other is a concrete thing. As an example, let us consider the box example from before. When you only look at the definition of the box, it is impossible to say what color a box is. You can generally say that the color of a box will be a string value. But there is no specific string value associated with the idea of a box. Instead, you would need to create an instance of a box in order to talk meaningfully about the color of that box. The concept of a box does not have a color. You can create an instance using the constructor function that is red or blue, but the original box object itself does not inherently have a color. One of the most critical part of using an instance is to access its fields. The period and the name of the field are used to access those fields. Generally, you can think of a field as like a variable that lives inside of an instance. In the code shown here, we access the name field of the dog instance stored in Ada. A critical thing to understand, however, is that you can only access the fields of an instance, not a data class. In other words, you cannot try to access the fields of the dog data class, only the Ada instance. If you try changing the code, you will see that you get an error when you try to access dog.name instead of ada.name. It's very important to understand the idea that the dog is an abstract idea, while the Ada instance is a real concrete bit of data. In the variables/values diagram shown here, you can see how data classes are traced a little differently compared to regular primitive types of data. When the constructor is called, a new instance of a data class is created. That instance is a special kind of value with multiple fields, which can be seen on the right-hand side of this diagram. When code accesses one of those fields, like on the second line shown, the arrow is followed and the relevant field's value is chosen. That value is a simple primitive string, and so can be stored directly in a variable. These arrows actually have a lot more significance than we want to talk about right now, but the important thing to recognize is that Ada variable points to a much more complex value than the my_dogs_name variable.